Good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining our Upland bird hunting Ask Me Anything class with Tyler Webster. We'll get going in just a minute here. Before we get rolling, just a couple quick housekeeping items. Your audio and video are turned off, so we can't see or hear you. So no worries if you got noise in the background or anything. This class is being recorded, so if you have to drop off earlier, if you want to go rewatch a segment of it or something, we'll have it uploaded to the onX Hunt YouTube channel tomorrow. And then we will also send you an email tomorrow evening. It'll be an email that comes, it'll be a Zoom email, comes from the Zoom program. We'll have the YouTube link in there, so you can just click on that to watch the video again if you want. If you do have questions, this is an Ask Me Anything. We have a couple questions that folks sent in, during registration that we're going to kick the class off with. But after that, it's kind of dictated by the questions that we get live here. So we will answer as many as we have time for. We're planning to go for about an hour tonight, but if the questions are really coming in and people are interested, we'll go a little bit longer if that's what people want. And then finally, we do have a giveaway tonight. We're giving away some of the Upland quad t-shirts that I'm wearing right here. So we're giving away 10 of those. You do have to be present towards the end of the class. We'll post the giveaway link in the chat. And then we'll draw the winners tomorrow morning and send those shirts out to those folks. So I guess introductions are in order. My name's Jack Headland. I'm coming to you from Stanley, North Dakota, I suppose. Tyler and I are actually
really
we're in the same house, but we had to go to different wings because we had some audio issues. So Tyler, how's it going?
Well, it's going pretty darn good. If for those of you guys out there that don't know me or aren't familiar with me, I'm Tyler Webster. I'm born and raised here in North Dakota. I've been the host of the Birds, Booze, and Buds podcast for the last 7 years that I recently rebranded to the Western Wing Shooter, which is what it initially started as. I've hunted all over the country, chased all the upland bird species except, well, I've chased valley quail. I just haven't successfully got one. And no, I do not count Himalayan snowcock as upland game bird species. So I've traveled enough and I've done enough stuff where Jack was nice enough to ask me if I wanted to come on here and talk to you guys.
I actually just lost you for a bit there, Tyler. I was futzing with the Wi-Fi, so I assume everything you said was complimentary about me. So,
well, you shot awfully well today for somebody who is you did everything the right way today. Like last night, you came in talking about how poorly you shoot, and then today you went out and actually killed birds. So, I mean, that was well done on your part.
well, under promise and over deliver, and we've got a few more days left, so there's still time.
Minnesota motto right there. Yeah.
Well, all right. What do you say we get into this? I do want to remind folks the chat is there. Chat's great just for letting us know where you're tuning in from. I see some people in there already. If you do have a question, either for myself, if you have like onX specific questions, I can handle a lot of those. Tyler's the upland bird hunting guru. So if you have questions for him, please drop them in the Q&A there and we'll get rolling. But we'll start with a few of the questions that folks sent in earlier. It was great. I think we had a question on almost every upland species that I could think of, from ptarmigan to the different quail species, different grouse species. Tyler's favorite, the Himalayan snowcock, even there was a question. So here's a question, kind of a timely one. With a 5-month-old puppy, what should I get done before wild bird season is over?
Just exposure. Just take that dog hunting. Take it on its puppy walks. I don't know if you have multiple dogs or if this is your only dog. If it's your only dog, I can't stress this enough. Have zero expectations, like none. Go out and just let that puppy have fun. Let it explore. Let it do everything that it wants to do, pretty much. I don't like putting an e-collar on a dog before it's about 5-6 months old, and at that point, it's only going to be as an emergency brake, like a dog running towards a road or barbed wire fence or something like that. But it's not going to be a corrective tool at that point. Like, that dog has no idea what anything means. I use the beeps on an e-collar with a puppy a lot, start getting it used to that for turning it, getting it to come back to me, whatever. Or even if it's chasing a deer or a rabbit or something like that, something it's not supposed to be. I'll start hitting those beeps on there and just kind of get its attention to like break its concentration on whatever it is it's doing wrong. But there's no right, there's nothing wrong that that puppy can do. Um, just taking it with on a hunting trip, it's going to learn so much. It's going to learn that what life in a kennel is. It's going to learn how to ride in a truck. It's going to learn that it can't always do what it wants to do. It's going to learn, hey, we don't get fed at twice a day. We don't get water anytime we want. It's um, you know, it just the life lessons of a bird dog. Learning that at 5 months old is such a valuable tool.
Awesome. Let's see. Next question here is one of your favorite birds. Where do you start hunting Mearns quail in the morning? Tops of ridges, bottoms, and what time do you typically start hunting in the morning?
Okay, so let's start with the last part of that question first. Um, I'm not going to start hunting Mearns quail until like usually that time of the year. Sunrise is about 8 o'clock down in Arizona, something like that. I'm going to give those birds a good hour before I'm going to get out of the pickup and start walking. Arizona is notorious for there's very seldom much wind. It's very dry. Uh, Mearns quail are a light scented bird, anyways. The scenting conditions are really challenging for a dog, and is what you kind of want. You want to let those birds get off their roost and go and start kind of milling around and laying down some scent for those dogs. And they're going to be feeding right away in the mornings. So I'm not going to start walking until 9:30, as long as it's, if it's going to be in the 70s or something like that and you have to get started early, you kind of have to. But typically the weather down there in the afternoon is going to be like 63, 64 degrees. It's going to be close to freezing at night. It's high desert. So I'm not going to start first thing in the morning. Now, with all that said, going back to the first part of that question, it's going to depend a little bit on what the weather is. So the colder that it is at night, and I've hunted Mearns quail down there the last couple of years, we've had snow. So it can get quite cold. Those birds are going to kind of tend to move up and out of the shade. Typically, they want to be in that shady north-facing slopes of those canyons. If it's cold at night, they're going to kind of move either into the bottom where they're going to get some sunlight or even up on top. If it's just kind of an average day, God, this is such a good question. There's so many different parts to this. It really depends on the hunting pressure, what time of the season that it is. Like if it's early season and those birds or those coveys you're running into non-contacted coveys, complete intact coveys. They're going to be, in the bottoms. As that pressure builds, they start to kind of move up the slope. And if it's been cold, if there's snow on the ground, you'll actually find them on the south facing slopes right away in the morning, because it's the first thing that's going to warm up in the morning. They'll kind of roost over there where they're going to get some of those early sunbeams, then they're going to start migrating down into the bottoms and then onto that north facing slope where you're typically going to find them. But it's such a multifaceted question. There's so many things. It really just depends day to day. It depends on like I said, I mean, it depends on what the high temperature was the day before. If it was in the 40s and if it's going to be down in the low 20s at night, I'm going to hunt that other side. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter what type of bird you're hunting. I'm just going to trust my dogs. My dogs are big enough running, and they've done it enough where, like I was saying in the first part of the question, once those birds start laying down some scent, uh, I can read my dogs well enough, and my dogs understand what's going on, and they're just going to kind of start slowly tracking and kind of almost grid searching, trying to figure out exactly which way those birds went, where they came from, whatever. And I'm just going to follow them to wherever they end up finding them. I'm not going to kind of I'm not going to call them back in. I'm not going to do none of that. I'm just going to trust them. Like that's what they are for. We really hunt as a team, and if I have a plan on, we're going to go this way, no matter what, I'm in charge. We're walking west, right? and the dog keeps on trailing off to the south, well, there's probably a reason for that. That dog doesn't understand why I want to go this way, and he just knows that, well, it smells like there's birds up this way, so I'm going to just follow that bird and trust him, or follow
It,
the
remi-
dog. Sorry.
it reminds me of Bob St. Pierre's line that he ends every Pheasants Forever podcast. Always follow the dog. Something good
That's
will
right.
happen. The
That's
amount
right.
of times my dog's gone somewhere and I'm like, I don't know. And it's like, Bob says follow the dog. And quite a few times there's a bird at the end of that dog's
Yeah.
nose.
Yeah. The bird or the dog's going to know way more information than what I'm going to have. Whatever. Well, like this morning, for example, me and Jack were out. I have kind of an idea of what those birds are going to be doing at a certain time of the day, but it's different every day. And that's one of the things that makes upland bird hunting so much fun. You can take an educated guess at something, and eight times out of 10, 7 times out of 10, you're probably going to be right. But if that dog doesn't know how to lie, the dog doesn't have an agenda. The dog's agenda is to find that bird for dad or mom. And if you just go with the flow a little bit instead of, being like, okay, no, we're going this way, and keep on calling the dog back in and just keep on, doing whatever, the dog doesn't, all that the dog knows is what it smells and what it sees and all that kind of stuff. And I'm just way more likely to just kind of keep on going the same direction the dog wants to go and not really have any preconceived notions on exactly where I'm going to hunt.
Awesome. There's a onX specific question in here. Adrian Rice asked, when will onX have both federal and state clear cut marks? I use onX and Scout and Hunt and would like one product. So that's going to be kind of state specific, Adrian. We've got the federal logging information for national forests. That's a federal data set we get from the U.S. Forest Service. So that's, from Washington to Florida and everywhere in between. State logging data is dependent on the state having a data set for us. So I know we currently have Pennsylvania and Minnesota. Minnesota DNR keeps track of all the logging on the not federal lands. So we have it for Minnesota. If you go into your Minnesota layer, it's called, I believe it's forest disturbance in Minnesota. I'm guessing based on the question, you're probably a rough grouse hunter, Western Great Lakes. I don't know if Michigan and Wisconsin have comparable data sets. If they do, and we're able to use them, they're publicly available and everything, we'll grab them and we'll put them in the app. I will make a note to chat with some of the mapping folks to see if they can go find that data. If it's there, we certainly want to have it in there. So we'll grab it and put it in there if it's available. Of course, it's dependent on Wisconsin, Michigan DNR having that info available to us. Let's see, there was one more pre-registration question I wanted to get to here. Let's talk a bird not a lot of folks talk about, blue grouse, e-scouting for blue grouse. So I live in Western Montana. I'm okay at hunting blue grouse. This year was a struggle. Bird numbers were down. Tyler, you've hunted them for a few different years and you don't live in blue grouse country. So you do have to kind of rely on e-scouting. So where do you start? What do you kind of look for?
The first thing I'm going to look at, so it depends on which part of the state and which state you're in as to which elevation I'm going to be looking at. But I'm going to be looking at that hybrid layer on the map where you can see the topo lines, you can see the elevation, but you can also see the satellite imagery. I'm looking for, and it doesn't really matter. I guess it doesn't matter quite as much as to how high the mountains get. I'm picking some of the highest mountains in that particular range. It can be 7,000 feet, it can be 5,000 feet, or it can be 12,000 feet and close to tree line. I've never hunted them that high, to be fair. The highest I've ever hunted them has been about 7,400 feet, I think. But I'm looking for what we call like parklands, kind of those open-ish meadows that's surrounded by trees. And at the tops of those ridges, then I'm gonna, like, that's my starting point. Then when I get there, and actually put boots on the ground, then I'm trying to actually look for certain types of trees that I end up finding duskies or blue grouse in more often than not. If I can find some big mature Douglas firs, I'm going to find blue grouse. Like that seems to be like the key. and I'm just not quite good enough at identifying trees through satellite imagery or anything like that to be able to tell that until I actually get there. And then depending a little bit on the time of the year, I only hunt them in September, typically before our season here in North Dakota gets started. It's kind of my first trip out west. I like hunting blue grouse early because it's a little bit cooler up in the mountains. You get down on the prairies, it's going to be blistering hot. Rattlesnakes aren't quite the concern that they are out on the prairie. You don't have to worry about cactus, all that kind of stuff. And on top of that, blue grouse are one of my favorite eating birds on the planet. Um, so that's gonna be my starting point. I'm gonna be marking kind of those clearings in the woods that you can't always see just by driving down a road. And for me, like blue grouse and elk kind of go hand in hand. And the same time I'm hunting blue grouse, there's a lot of people in the woods looking for elk as well. So I'm going to try to find some of those ones that are actually a little bit more accessible that an elk hunter likely isn't going to be in, because I've had it happen before where I was walking, my old dog Rusty, was laying right here by my feet, went on point. Covey of blue grouse, or I guess a flock family group of blue grouse, went up. I shot two, and about 300 yards down the clearing, I watched a guy in full camo and a bow walk out of the wood line and just start walking back to his truck. And I felt kind of bad. It's like, I get it. He didn't know I was there. I didn't know he was there. There's nobody at fault. I talked to him afterwards. He was super nice. He's like, dude, it's a national forest. You have just as much right to be here as I do. But since then, I did start kind of looking for some stuff that's going to be a little bit more accessible and a little bit less remote, because most people that are up there that time of the year aren't targeting blue grouse. And it's not necessarily one of those birds that you have to go miles back in to find more birds. A lot of times you can find them a little bit closer to the road systems. And you're just less likely to run into other people that are out there chasing something other than you.
Yeah. And I'll add to that, around Missoula, a lot of what I look for is I like finger ridges. And a lot of
Mhm.
times one side of that will be pretty thick timber and the other side's more open,
Yep.
especially early. Look for grasshoppers too. I've had
Grasshoppers are
huskies
key. And
full
when
of
when
grasshoppers.
yeah, when we were out there in September this year out by Missoula, that was the big thing that had changed from last year to this year. And honestly, it's the same thing out here on the prairie. You guys over there were very wet. Grasshoppers tend to be something that happens a little bit more in a drier year, it seems like. And the first day that we were hunting, like, we didn't see enough grasshoppers to feed one grouse, let alone,
Mhm.
multiple broods of grouse. And consequently, we also didn't see a whole lot of blue grouse. The next day that we did get into blue grouse, there was a lot of grasshoppers, and we ended up doing quite well. So it's they're that early September timeframe. Those soft-bodied insects are their main type of food that they're going to be looking for. That's their brood rearing food. That them soft-bodied insects, and they will transition into berries and all that kind of stuff. But if you can find grasshoppers, you're going to find birds early.
Yep. And I've never chased them late. It gets to be October, pheasant season opens in Montana, duck season opens, our rifle season opens. I don't chase duskies as much, but remember, they're reverse migrators. So they go
Hmm.
higher in the mountains as the season goes on. So there's some years you're just not going to get to them unless you have a snowmobile,
Right,
but
for
they will
sure.
park up in. I've seen spring bear hunting is low key the best time to scout for blue grouse because they're hooting in the spring and the
Mhm.
males are very visible and audible. I
If
go
there's
back there in
males, there's gonna be
September
females,
and
and there's
they're
gonna be broods.
they're not
Mhm.
always in the same spot, but they're pretty close. And but I've found in some of the snow melt when I'm up there spring bear hunting, just piles of droppings because they're
Mhm.
parked up in a fir tree all winter eating
Yep.
needles. And they'll spend the whole winter in one tree or, a stand of trees. And then they start moving down, as the thaw comes and the insects are down lower.
The only big male blue grouse I ever got came out of the biggest fir tree on a ridge. Like, if you looked at this whole ridge, it was miles long, and it's like, that is a big dang tree. And right underneath that, the biggest male blue grouse I ever got came out of. If
Yeah.
you can find fir trees, you're gonna find blues. Like, you're in the right habitat.
And I keep thinking of other points. if you're they do like that kind of sagebrush edge of the forest type habitat. We were hunting kind of more southeastern, south central part of the state, or excuse me, southwestern, south central part of the state this year. And we shot Huns and Blues on the same walk. So there
Mm-hmm.
was a big patch of aspens in kind of the sagebrush, and my group didn't get them, but another group shot 2 blues out of there. So
Yeah.
don't um, don't ignore those areas. And it wasn't as necessarily as high of elevation. It was mid-September, so they're probably as low as they're going to be. And they do love aspens just like rough grouse do too.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely.
Here's a dog question, Tyler. Do you use boots on your dogs? And do you use anything for their eyes to protect them? Andrew from Minnesota says those late season cattails can get rough.
Yeah. Let's talk about the eye protection first. I don't, but will say I'm dog goggle curious a little bit. There's last year, right before I took off on this big road trip, my young setter Jessie, she actually put one of the pointy tops of a cattail into her eye, and it actually ended up. And it was dark by the time we got home. I always check my dogs, didn't see anything, and after you get out of cattails, their eyes are kind of irritated anyways. The next morning, we loaded the dogs in the dark. We were driving to Idaho to go chase chuckers, and we stopped in Billings for lunch. And I let her out to go to the bathroom, and her eye was shut. And I opened it, and it was like there was a bunch of stuff in the corner of it, and it was really red, and it didn't look good. So I took her to the emergency vet, and they actually had to pull a little piece of cattail stalk or whatever out of her cornea. And it wasn't a big deal. The eye was fine, it was still intact. Um I just had to give her some drops and keep it clean for a week or something like that. The vet wasn't overly concerned about it. But since then, I've been thinking about the rec specs. I haven't ran them, and I don't know how my dogs. I mean, I'm sure they're just like boots. Once they get them on there and they start hunting, they probably just wouldn't even pay any attention to it. But the cattails will cut up the corners of their eyes and stuff like that. There's all that fuzz that pops off those things that I can't stand. They get in my eyes, they get in my mouth, my nose. I'm sure it's the same thing with the dogs. And so I haven't done it yet, but I'm definitely considering at least giving them a shot and seeing how well they work. As far as boots go, I always have boots with. Um, Whether it's on a like a long hunting trip or just on a day trip, I always have dog boots in the truck. If it happens here at home, like say my dogs are very used to hunting here in North Dakota. We don't have super rough ground. We don't have a lot of cactus. We don't have a ton of rock. It's pretty easy on their feet other than some of the stubble. Um, if a dog tears up a pad or something here, I'm probably just going to rest it for the rest of the day anyways, because I have 4 dogs, so I hunt one dog at a time, and I'll make like 4 walks a day. I try to get each dog a walk. And so if a dog tears a pad or something like that, that dog won't hunt for a day or two, and then next time I take it out, I'll boot it. On long trips, uh, this is a lot more. Well, the gentleman said he was from Minnesota. The people that come from the Great Lakes states, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, they have a lot sandier soil than a lot of the more western states. Montana, I think, is the worst state on dogs' feet. My buddy Wes Larrabee sitting here agreeing. It's really hard ground. There's rocks. There's a lot of cactus. It's just awful on their feet. Um, there are spots in Montana that I won't even put a dog down in. In Chucker country, like. I guess I guess the best way to answer the question is I don't boot a dog unless I absolutely have to. I won't. I have the luxury of dog power, so when I'm on those big trips, like say for chucker or for quail down in Arizona or whatever it is, my dogs all hunt one dog for the day, and it'll get 3 days off, and that's how you kind of keep fresh dogs. So I'm not as concerned about pads. If you have one dog and you're going on a trip like that, I would absolutely boot them. Like an ounce of prevention, and whatever the saying is, it's that kind of thing where it's like if you're relying on that dog for your entire hunt, just boot it. It's just like it's the best course of action, because if that dog does blow a pad or something, now you're kind of already behind the eight ball a little bit. That dog's going to start favoring everything. And as we were talking about earlier, Jack, um, like day one, walk one, day two, even day three, it's not, you might not notice it, but as that dog starts to wear down over the course of a long hunt, it's more likely to get injured, like whether it's like ACLs, MCLs, shoulders, whatever it is, just because their muscles aren't reacting quite as fast as they were day one, day two. And so with that dog, if you have one boot on it because it blew a pad day one, and it's running different and it's tired, now you really have serious health consequences that can end up coming from that. So I always have boots with. I don't wear them. I don't put them on my dogs unless I absolutely have to.
Yeah, I do the same thing. And luckily I've never had to with my dog Ada, but I always have, a boot in the vest and more in the truck in case
Right.
she would hurt something. I can throw one on her, get her back to the truck. And, I just have the one dog. So if it's bad, I'll probably call it. It's not
Okay.
worth
Yeah.
risking a
Right.
long term something for an extra pheasant or something.
Right.
So
And the other, there's Gun Dog Supply Company did what I think is the best video on how to boot dogs. It's on YouTube, I think, or on the Gun Dog Supply website. I use the same boots that he's talking about in there. I use the Lewis vented dog boots. Um, and when you order a set, and don't just order one, because a dog's likely going to throw one. Just happens. Like I have 6 for each dog. Thankfully, my 2 females wear the same size boot, and my 2 males wear the same size boot. So I have like 2 larges and then 2 extra, or 2 I'm sorry, I have 1 set of larges and 1 set of extra larges plus 2 boots apiece. So I have 6 dog boots for each size. That way I have a full set plus 2 backups. You're likely not going to have to put boots on all 4 dog, or on all 4 feet of the dog, unless you're likely hunting in a spot that you maybe should not be. But
awesome. Here's a onX question. Todd asks, other than waypoint colors, is there a good way to organize waypoints for certain weather conditions? For example, warm and dry or heavy snow cover. I've never thought about that, Todd. That is a good idea. I do color code my waypoints, and everybody does it a little different since I hunt pretty much everything they'll give me a tag for, from elk, deer, bear, upland, waterfowl. I do my colors are by species. So my upland are one color, my waterfowl's another color, elk are one color. If you're primarily an upland hunter, I could see doing my pheasants are one color, sharpies are one color, rough grouse are another color, etc. So if you're
I just
using
use the notes. I
in
use the notes a lot. Yeah. And I'll do that with the time of the year and the species. So in the notes, I'll be like, mid-November pheasants, whatever. But the
yep,
notes are key.
I do that. And then, Todd, I was reading your question earlier. I think one thing you could do, if you truly have very different, this is a heavy snow cover, these are heavy snow cover waypoints, and these are warm and dry, you could make different folders, and you could have heavy snow cover folder, put all those waypoints in that folder, warm and dry, put all those waypoints in that folder. And then those folders you can easily toggle on and off. So when it's late season, heavy snow cover, you could remove your warm and dry, your late season waypoints so that they're not confusing you or cluttering up the map, and you just have the pertinent ones. So that might be something you could try as well.
Mm-hmm.
All right. North Dakota question from Steven. Was in North Dakota 2 weeks ago. Decided to try to hunt the golden hour for the first time, which for folks that aren't in the know, the golden hour is kind of the last hour of the day. Saw an amazing amount of birds on the edge of crops heading back into roadside ditches, which was not overly heavy cover. Just wondering your strategy on getting close to those birds, or do you just wait until they get a little deeper into heavier cover?
Okay, there's a lot to unpack in this question. This is going to depend a lot on the time of the year. I mean, obviously, he was here in October. October pheasants, in my mind, in the way that I think about them, I think about October as tourist season, and I mean that in the best sense of the word. Everybody wants to come to come to North Dakota in October because it is really cool. You know, all the species are open. You can still get sharptails and huns to hold occasionally. The migration's going on, everything else. Pheasant hunting gets better as it gets colder. Um, like the best pheasant hunting of the year is going to be like your first snowfall, which we haven't had yet. And is what it does is it makes it so that those birds don't run. If you're going to try to hunt the golden hour in October, you really need blockers. It really kind of comes down to that. If they're going to be in stuff that's not thick. Now, the one exception to that rule is if they're on the edge of a cattail slough, perfect. They will hold in cattails. If they're running into CRP or a road ditch, like you said, first of all, anybody out there that's watching, North Dakota is not like South Dakota. You cannot hunt road ditches if the field's posted. Just want to make sure that everybody's aware of that. Everybody's kind of used to the rules in South Dakota where the road ditches are the only thing in the field that aren't posted. If the field is posted, you cannot hunt the road ditch in North Dakota. It goes along with the rights of that landowner on that side of the road. But if you're going to hunt birds out of a road ditch, specifically a road ditch, you need a blocker because those birds are just going to run and flush at 150 yards. If you can, I would just focus on the areas that have that thick cover that you can get a bird to hold in where it feels secure, whether it be bushes or cattails or kind of that heavier CRP grass or something like that. Then you'll probably have some success. The last hour of the evening for me, and me and Jack talked about this today, I think that us as upland bird hunters, we don't really have a real good chill button on us. That first hour and a half of the morning and that last hour and a half of the day, I'm not walking a ton. I'm going to be driving roads. I'm going to be planning out my next day's hunt. I'm going to be like, okay, there's a bunch of birds in this field. Where are they going to be in that field midday? And then I'm going to go back there the next morning and look, and yep, sure enough, they're there, and they're flying into this cattail slough, or they're flying into this creek bottom, or whatever the case may be. Um, the last hour of the day, it is kind of a cool time to hunt, but it's not going to be your best time of the day. It's going to be the time of the day where you're likely to not get very good dog work. The birds aren't going to want to hold for the dogs very well. They're going to be jumpier. They're going to be running because they know they're exposed out in the field. They're very used to hawks and owls and all that kind of stuff that's trying to kill them all day long, coyotes, whatever the case may be. Also, bird hunters. And so they know they're exposed. They know that you see them, and they know that the best way they know to get away from danger is to run and then fly a long ways away. So I'm not hunting. I'm not one that really walks a lot that last hour and a half of the day, but there's a couple tips in there for if you are one of those guys. Just look for those places that you can, if you can push them into some thicker cover and you can get them to hold, then you'll do okay.
Awesome. Question about another one of your favorite birds. Joe asks, please discuss how to best use onX to find the best habitat for Hungarians in North Dakota. So it's another thing we kind of talked about a little bit today.
Yeah. There's a couple, there's a layer on onX that's kind of key for this. It's a crop layer. The crop layer would be like this year's 2024. It'd be the 2023 crop information. So you have to kind of familiarize yourself a little bit with the crop rotation schedule. If it was canola last year, it's likely going to be wheat this year. Those are going to be the two primary things that I'm going to be focused on for Huns in particular. Primarily wheat, more so than canola. They're certainly in canola fields. I personally just don't like to hunt it quite as much because it is a little bit harder on dogs. The stalks are a little bit tougher. They're pokier, And a lot of them, if they're cut high, they're kind of right at that eye level that we were talking about earlier. And so I tend to just stay out of them. I really like hunting wheat fields though. Wheat fields are really, really cool. And I'm going to be looking for the edges of what I would consider to be pheasant cover. So if I look at a spot and it's got a bunch of little potholes in it, or it's got a coulee that runs between the egg, or something like that, that's what I'm going to kind of be focused on. I'm going to be looking for those riparian zones next to primarily wheat fields. And if you can find those two, you're likely to find a pretty decent, or at least have a pretty decent shot at finding some huns.
I've pulled up on the map here just for folks, if you haven't used it yet, the crop layer. If you go into hunt map layers and scroll down below the states there, go to the trees, crops, and soil folder. US crop distribution is the third one down there. So that's a good one. Yeah, turn that on, take a look. Like Tyler said, it's 2024 right now. This is 2023 data. We typically get that data February, March every year. So we'll get the 2024 data late next February, early March. There's not a way to have the current year because it's kind of being aggregated while the growing season's going on. So you do have to kind of know the crop rotation, but even if you don't, I kind of figured it out this year. I was hunting southeastern Montana. So I live in Missoula, Montana, western, and I grew up in Minnesota. Crop rotation in central Minnesota is basically corn and soybeans pretty much every year. I didn't know what the rotation was in southeastern Montana, but I started driving around and I looked at all the fields that were labeled corn last year. A lot of them were wheat this year.
Mm.
And a lot of the ones that were labeled, on the map as wheat were corn. So I'm like, well, it wasn't 100%, of course, but it was enough where I was like,
Right.
all right, so if I want to hunt, pheasant hunting, a lot of the corn was still standing, but some of it was out. If I was going to hunt, some cut corn fields or the edges of them, I was looking for the wheat symbol, that brown color on my map. And not every
Right.
time, but I'd say 75, 80% of the time it was corn, and, it worked out a few times.
Going back to Huns for just a second, there's a couple more things that, and we kind of alluded to it with the Mearns quail a little bit. A person really needs to kind of understand the daily habits and routines of some of these birds. So whether it's like with Huns, for example, if you're hunting a wheat field or the edge of a wheat field where it butts up to prairie, or there's a draw that goes through it with bushes, or whatever the case may be, like or slough bottoms, like I was talking about, one of those spots that you're likely to find huns. Uh, if you're walking that, the edge of those cattail sloughs, or the edge of the wheat, or whatever it is, in the first thing in the morning or the last thing in the evening, those birds are likely to be 200 to 300 yards out in the ag feeding, or even 100 yards out into the ag feeding, and you'll just end up bumping birds that are wild sitting out there in the ag. It's another one of those things that I really think that us as upland hunters really just need to settle down just a little bit and let those birds get back into what I consider to be their loafing cover. That first hour and a half of the morning, they're going to be out there in the field, in the wheat field, doing their thing. And then as the morning goes on, say 10:30, 11 o'clock, they start to kind of work back into that thicker cover. And then they kind of nestle in a little bit. They're like, if you're looking at like a draw that's like this, right? And you got wheat field here and wheat field here. The Huns they can be in the bottom, wherever there's good cover on the sides, in during the day, and that cover is going to be thicker where the dogs are actually going to be able to get them pointed. You're going to be able to get closer to them. The birds are likely to hold a little bit better, just because they feel secure. That first part of the morning and the last part of the night, you're kind of hunting birds that are a little bit on edge anyways, and you can end up walking a lot of the nice cover down in the bottoms where those birds would be in the mid-afternoon when those birds are out in the fields feeding.
We had a couple of questions. I'm looking at one from Chris right now. Tips for hunting rough grouse without a dog. I'm in the Pacific Northwest, if that matters. There was a few just, hey, I'm hunting without a dog. what do you recommend? Of course, it's going to be different depending on the species. I think rough grouse sometimes might be easier without a dog,
Walk
depending on
trails,
the
man.
cover. I know and I'm not going to claim I'm certainly not the world's greatest dog trainer. I'm not going to say my dog Ada, love her to death. She's not the world's greatest bird dog. There's been times where it's like I could have had a few birds if it weren't for Ada busting them 80 yards
Sure,
ahead of me.
sure.
Rough grouse especially, and I grew up hunting rough grouse northern Minnesota without a dog, and we walked a lot of logging roads. They come out.
Mhm,
My favorite time to hunt was after like a rainstorm. The sun comes
mhm.
out. They wanted to come out and kind of dry off,
Yep.
so you still got to find good habitat, find those young aspen stands for rough grouse. Pacific Northwest, I hunt Missoula. That's pretty close. I'm mostly looking at creek bottoms. I don't know that I've shot a
Mhm.
roughie more than a quarter mile from a creek or a stream.
Yeah.
Not that they necessarily need the water, I don't think. It's just that's where the
It's
good
that cover.
cover is for them.
Exactly.
But rough grouse, I mean, they'll hold tight. I've almost stepped on rough grouse before, but if you walk a little ways and just stop, hang out for a
Mhm,
few minutes, they'll get nervous and then
mhm.
they'll flush. Now you still got to hit them and in some of that
That's the
thick
hard
stuff.
part. Yeah.
Tyler, I mean, I know you love rough grouse hunting. You love being in the thick woods and you don't get
Oh,
claustrophobic
yes.
at all.
Yes. No, not at all. Yeah, it's, you and I are built for, busting cattails. We're not like, we're about a foot too tall and about 200 pounds too heavy to be, the ideal size of a rough grouse hunter, which I think is about 5'5", 130. So,
Yep.
yeah, it's not my favorite thing to do, but, um, you know, it's not rough grouse related, but I ran into opening weekend of pheasant season. I was hunting a piece of public land south of here, and I ran into three guys from the Minot Air Force Base, and they were down there without a dog, pushing cover that you'd have a hard time getting birds to hold with a dog. And so I let Rusty out, and it was just me and him. We went 3/4 of a mile. I got my 3 birds. He pointed probably 60, and I was on my way out. I just shot my last bird and, ran into these guys, and they were walking this little strip of bushes, and they're like, "Hey, are you finding any birds?" I was like, "Yeah, lots." And they're like, "Well, we've walked for 4.5 miles. We've been out here for, like, 3 hours, and we haven't seen one yet." And I was like, "Well, where's your dog?" And he's like, "We don't have one. We just, we we can do it without a dog." And I was like, "You really kind of can't." Like, I mean, you can in certain areas and in certain types of cover, but in the stuff that they were hunting, it's really unlikely that they're going to get a bird to like unless they literally step on it. And on cue, my watch goes off, and I got a dog on point, and like right at the end of the little row of bushes that they just got done walking, and I was like, "Well, my you guys just walked out of there." I said, "My dog's got a bird right there." I said, "I'm all limited out. Do you guys want to go shoot it?" And he's like, "There's no birds there. There's no birds there." Walked over there. I was like, "Get your guns ready. There's a bird here." And he's like, "Oh yeah, whatever." And literally kicked right in front of the dog, and a rooster took off. And they didn't even shoot at it. They were so flabbergasted. They're like, "I can't believe they hold that tight." They hold that tight sometimes, and especially in that thick cover like that, those birds will just let you walk past them. So I guess the moral of the story is, either get friends with bird dogs. Bird dogs are a little bit like having a friend with a really nice fishing boat. Works really well. Just go with them, or just take the plunge like the rest of us and get a dog, because it makes everything else so much more fun and so much easier.
Yeah. I mean, I was a guy without a dog for a long time. I wanted to hunt birds more. I was pretty much doing mountain grouse around, Western Montana, spruces, ruffs, duskies. Never really did pheasants much. I went with some other guys a few times. But I think no matter what the species is, without a dog, there's going to be certain covers it's not worth hunting. There might be
Sure.
birds there. And even with me with one dog, it's a hard lesson I've had to learn
Yep.
because it's for me with a lot of species. It's like there's animals there. And I'm like,
Hmm.
there's got to be a way to hunt them. And I'm not in the know, or I'm not good enough. And it's like, sometimes you're
Sometimes
not going to
there
get them.
right. With pheasants specifically, and I talk to a lot of people about being a little bit choosy on the size of cover that you're going to work. Kind of stick to the stuff that you can work effectively, because as we were saying, everybody that's ever hunted pheasants knows how they run. If you get into a piece of, say, cattails, which is where most of the birds in Minnesota, North Dakota, South Dakota, well, not South Dakota, we're not going to talk about South Dakota, but North Dakota and Minnesota, that's where the majority of those birds are going to come out of or get shot in. And if it's too big, those birds will just run around you. It happens all the time. The other big mistake that I see people make is that they hunt just entirely too fast when they're in that kind of thick cover. Like we have a hunting camp up here every year, and the one group, they're like, well, why we keep on flushing hens, dogs keep on pointing hens, flushing hens, but no roosters. And I was like, well, that is because you guys are just walking past them. You guys are walking way too fast. You guys are pushing because the dogs are, there's birds flushing or whatever. And he's like, yeah, now that you say that, there was a bunch, all the roosters we seen all came up behind us. I was like, yeah, you guys, like, you got to, like, it's just like you were talking about with the rough grouse. Stop. Like, I've shot a lot of rooster pheasants by just stopping and standing still in a cattail slough for 30 seconds. And there's a bird 10 feet away from you that gets nervous and jumps.
I did that exact same thing this year. I was hunting Montana, and my dog went on point. It was some cattails, and it was borderline too big. I wasn't aiming for it, but that's where the dog went on point. So I followed, and a couple hens got up, and I'm like, Tyler would say to stop here. I literally was like,
Yeah.
I'm just going to stand here. And a rooster got up, and I got it.
Yeah.
I stood there 15,
But did
20
you count to three?
seconds.
Did you count to three before you
It
pulled
was
the trigger?
far enough out.
Okay.
I wasn't
Okay.
left with just two wings attached in the middle
So
there. So
now, every time that a rooster gets up, you're gonna hear my voice in your head saying, "Count to three."
that bird I
Two,
shot today
one, two,
may have
three.
been close, but there's not many pellets in the meat. I
No,
hit that right in the head.
you really came close to missing that one. Really almost missed him.
Yep,
But you
but I
aired on
didn't.
the right side. That's right. That's right.
Here's kind of a road trip. You've made a lot of road trips.
Yeah.
Camping, trying to make an upland road trip cheap by living out of the truck. What's a quick rundown of a good setup to keep it easy and cozy for you and a dog?
Well, the easy part is not going to be easy. If you're going to do it out
Yeah.
of a truck on a road trip, the amount of gear that's going to go into it is going to be pretty substantial. So your packing list is, it's going to include, and all this is very dependent on the time of the year and the area of the country that you're going to be going in. Um, you know, there was a thing that we were talking about this last weekend. There's like this time of the year, we just had the time change here the other day. It's not a really fun time of the year to make a road trip where you're sleeping in a pickup or in a tent because it's dark at 5:30, 5 o'clock at night, and you're sitting there with nothing to do. The West, like here in North Dakota right now, we have a burn ban going on. We're in a pretty severe drought. We haven't had any moisture, so you can't have a campfire, can't do anything. You just got to sit in the dark in your tent and look at your phone if you have internet service or whatever. So I guess like the easy part of that question is that it's not going to be super easy. If you have a couple of friends, it's going to make it a little bit more enjoyable. If you have some other people that are just as nuts as you are, and you can kind of, you get a big tent. You get, if it's October, if the weather's going to be cold, you're going to need really good heat sleeping bags. You're going to need, all that kind of stuff. Then you have to worry about all the cooking stuff, and you don't have to worry about coolers, thankfully, or at least not ice because it's going to be cold. But all the road trips that we make, I've had the podcast for so long now that I have built up a network of people all over the country. And a lot of people come up here and hunt with me, and I'll go and stay with them. And that's the beautiful thing of social media for me, is that it lets you make connections with people from around the country that might have something that you want to hunt, and you might have something that they want to hunt. So a lot of the road trip making is going to be like, for me to, the big road trip that we got coming up here in a month or so. It's from here to South Dakota, where we'll likely get a hotel room for a night, because we're just going to hunt chickens for a night, and it's going to be December in South Dakota. It's going to be likely not warm. Then we're going to go and hunt with my buddy Tim Brown in Iowa. And then we're going to go and hunt with my buddy Fred in Kansas. And then we're going to go to Arizona to my aunt's bed and breakfast. And then we're going to go and, so you can kind of make these hopscotch things where you have like a base of operations, and you can make day trips out of there. I've done the camping thing, in September. It's great. Early October, some years it's great. But the amount of gear that you have to pack with for something like that is substantial, and it takes a lot of time, and a lot of room.
Yeah, I've done a few, big game trips where I'm sleeping
Hmm.
out of the truck, or I used to have a Suburban, which to me that's the vehicle for me. I've
Sure.
got a pickup now and I miss my Suburban mostly because the back doesn't get full of dust. Uh,
Hmm.
and it's just kind of a little more cozy in there. But yeah, I think you nailed it. I mean, I definitely don't want to discourage anybody from, man, if that's the way you're going to get out hunting and just paying for an
Yeah.
Airbnb or a hotel's not in the cards, do it. I would
Hmm.
do earlier season, because it's
Absolutely.
not as cold. You don't have to worry as much about that aspect of it. In that case, I might pack a cooler with some ice for the
Hmm.
birds. Um, and you're not, stuck in the dark for 14 hours a day,
Yeah, like
whatever it is.
it's a real thing when it comes to you get done with hunting at 5 o'clock and 5:30, and it's dark, and now you got to cook yourself some dinner in the dark, and you can't have a campfire. Or, if you can have a campfire, I mean, that changes everything for me.
Yep.
Because like, if I'm going to go camping, God dang it, I want a campfire. Like, that is part of the experience for me, is sitting around the campfire at the end of the day and having, a couple of cold drinks with some friends. And, you know, I still love a grilled hot dog over top of a campfire. But just the camaraderie, and there's something about staring into a fire that's just so primal, and it just makes everything kind of complete at the end of the day. If you can't do that, I don't want to do it. And
Mhm.
and then you have literally from 5 o'clock until, I have a hard time falling asleep before 9:30 or even 10 o'clock a lot of times, even if I am tired. You got 4.5 hours sitting in a tent, reading, messing around on your phone. That's just not that much fun.
You're right. Let's see. There was a question here. I'm trying to find who asked it, but you run pointing dogs. I run pointing dogs. We don't give enough love to the flushers. So I found it here. Chris asked, any tips for hunting a variety of species behind a flushing dog? Hunted pheasants for the first time with this year with my young Springer, which I love
Mm,
Springer Spaniels.
yep,
Realizing that most bird hunting info assumes you're hunting with a pointer. Tips for hunting with a flusher, and said mention hunting alone with one dog. So I'm sure
sure.
you've still hunted with, Springers, Labs, variety of
I have
flush dogs.
Springers and Labs in the last 5 days. Uh, so you're talking about the right tool for the job when you're talking about a Springer or a flushing dog and primarily hunting pheasants. Honestly, our pointing dogs, not like, I mean, it's a little bit like using a hammer with a screw. I mean, it'll get the job done, but it's not exactly the right tool for the job. The biggest pointer that I can give you for hunting by yourself with a flushing dog is, like we were talking about a few minutes ago, be very realistic about how big a cover you and your dog can hunt effectively. You can, sure, there's a ton of birds out in some of those like 60, 80 acre pieces of cattails, or, lakes, or whatever the case may be. Whatever, I'm not sure which state he's hunting in, but I mean, you're first of all, you're going to burn your dog up in one walk if you're hunting something that's that big. Second of all, those birds are just going to run around one dog and one person. So just be very realistic about what you can handle with you and the dog together working as a team. And cattails and thick cover. I mean, that's what those springers are made for. And springers are, we hunted with a couple springers last week that were, fantastic, fantastic pheasant dogs. They're great retrievers. They track very well. They put a lot of pressure on a small area, and they're a lot of fun to watch. I mean, hunting pheasants with a flushing dog is a ton of fun, and it's highly, highly effective.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, talk about being built for cattails. My 50-pound female wire hair, that's not her game. She,
No,
she cannot bust through those. I think I told you the story or the morning before I got to your place. I was still hunting in Montana and dumped a pheasant in a big patch of cattails, and I was grid searching and knee deep muck through the
yeah,
cattail trying to find the last bird, and didn't find it. And I spent half hour looking for it. So, and to me,
hmm
that's almost like, I've lost deer before. It's almost that bad.
right,
When you work so hard for a bird. So know what you can handle, and also know, springers and labs, phenomenal retrievers. Know if
right.
you dump a bird in some thick cover, to be able to find it too.
Yeah, I mean the biggest key with finding down pheasants, it doesn't matter what breed of dog you are, is make sure the dang pheasant's dead.
Yeah.
I kind of half jokingly, but in also semi seriously, I tell everybody to embrace a double tap when it comes to pheasants. If you pull the trigger and you can see that bird's head still up, whack it again. Unless it's got a leg dropped as well, because if that bird hits the ground and it ain't dead, I don't care if you have a pack of labs, the chance of you recovering that bird out of some cattails, not great.
Yeah.
So,
If it's got
you
its
know,
legs under it, man.
yeah, you really need to. And the other big mistake that I see people make with pheasants primarily, but all birds, when you pull the trigger and that bird goes down, right there. I mean, like, get there as quick as you possibly can, because it doesn't really matter. If it's if even if it's a sharp tail grouse or a hun or whatever it is, they'll move on you, and you can be very certain. It's like, hey, that bird hit the ground right here. Yeah, well, it's not here now. And the faster that you can get your dog there, the better the chance of you getting that bird recovered. And just, if you have any questions about whether or not if you're going to find the bird or not, I don't care if more birds are flushing or not. Like, you got one bird on the ground, you get up there and you get that bird, and then after that, then we'll go and deal with the rest of them.
Yeah. I've gotten greedy before and go
Hmm.
for the
Me too.
double. And it's
Yep.
like, get one and then
Yep.
go find more.
Yep. Exactly.
Here's a Arizona quail question for you. Brian asks, do you find more quail around tanks or ponds in Arizona? And correspondingly, is this something you look for when digital scouting? So he didn't mention
Uh,
the quail species, but I would guess it would maybe apply to all of them.
yeah, it would apply a little bit to all of them. It's very year to year specific. If it's been really, really dry, my buddy John Odell, who used to work for the Arizona Game and Fish Department, he always referred to it as a quarter-mile death circle around a water tank. If you're out there walking and you see a tank, I'm certainly going to spend a little bit of time there. More so with gambles and well, really specifically gambles, but also if you're in scale quail country down there, you can run into them. And I've certainly found Mearns quail, relatively close to tanks up in the hills as well. It's not necessarily something that I'm going to e-scout for. When I'm e-scouting, let's take Gamble's and scale quail, for example. Gamble's quail, I'm looking for what they call arroyos, like dry creek beds, and they're going to be packed with the nastiest, thorniest, thickest, most disgusting stuff you've ever walked through in your life. That's where those Gamble's quail are likely to be. So I'm going to look for some of those. Like, if there's a road that goes and there's a bunch of those little arroyos, or access to different sections of an arroyo. Very similar to the pheasant hunting stuff. Don't bite off more than you can chew. Find something that you can work well, you and your dog, because just like pheasants, those Gamble's quail run like crazy. Um, Scale quail, I'll find them close to tanks sometimes, but it really, it's not the limiting factor for those, or for Mearns. Like with Mearns, there's, if you find them around a tank, you find them around a tank, but it's not something I'm going to focus on. Gambles, yes.
Awesome. we're at now. We're here. We're probably going to go a little bit more. There's a lot of good questions in there, but I'm going to post the giveaway link in the chat for everybody. So that's in there now. Click on that. You get entered to win the same t-shirt. Well, not this t-shirt, but a t-shirt just like it. And some people do sometimes have trouble with that giveaway link. Some phones won't let you click on it. You might have to try to like copy and paste it or type it in manually, write it down. The giveaway is good. It's open until midnight tonight. So if you're watching this class on YouTube after November 4th, it's not open anymore. I'm sorry, but we do these giveaways pretty much every class. So sign up for another one. While I'm on the topic of master classes, there was a question in there. I can't find the name right now, but asking about just a general onX tutorial. I do an onX Hunt 101 every month, and it's an hour and a half class because there's so much into the app to talk about. I try to keep it short and I just can't. So it's an hour 20, hour and a half pretty much every time. But that is, if you're looking for the basics, I need to learn how to get started. Check those out. The next one will be November, it's either the 20th or the 21st. One of those two dates. I'm going to be in the Northwoods, Minnesota next week without internet. So once I return, we'll pick those back up. You can go to our website and look for the Masterclass tab, or go to just Google onX Hunt Masterclasses. Sign up there. That's going to take you through layers, offline maps, waypoints, all that good stuff. So wanted to get that plug in there. You know what we haven't talked about is bob whites. When you're hunting bob whites, and you primarily hunt plains bob whites, Kansas, Oklahoma, which is it's unfortunate. Bob whites are kind of down in a lot of the Southeast. Seems like the Southern Great Plains are kind of the stronghold for them. What are you looking for habitat wise when hunting bob whites?
Okay, so I primarily hunt bob whites in Kansas, and there's a couple of things that I'm going to be looking for. When I'm hunting Kansas, I'm almost exclusively hunting Weehaw land, except when I'm hunting with my friend Fred, who he works for a seed company. He has a couple farmers that let us hunt bob whites as long as deer season's not going on, because that's a real big thing down there in Kansas. When I'm looking for bob whites on Weehaw, let's focus on the public land stuff for what I'm looking for. I'm looking for milo fields, and I'm looking for brushy hillsides. So where the milo and say cedar trees, plum thickets, CRP grass, all that kind of stuff, very, very similar to Huns in basically all aspects, really. With bob whites, just like with Huns, you can hear them. You can hear them calling in the mornings. If you bust up a covey, you can hear them talking, trying to get back together. And the same pattern throughout the day is going to be true for bob whites as it is for Huns, with some exceptions. If it's warm outside, those bob whites a lot of times will live right in the milo. You can walk right across the milo field, and you can get into coveys of bob whites. As it gets colder, they're going to start moving more and more into that thermal cover, and then walking out or flying out, primarily walking out into that milo. I do find some of them in wheat stubble cover that's surrounded by wheat stubble as well, but it's going to be milo and woody, grassy cover. So whether it's a creek bottom or a hillside, and I don't want to move too fast past the cedars. If you're finding cedars, you start finding bob whites on those grassy hillsides. The cedars and the plum thickets together, money. Like, that's 100% what I'm going to look for. If I can find that ag with that woody cover, that's going to be a spot I'm going to find bob whites for sure.
Awesome. Here's one. This is a question our customer support gets a lot. Tyler, as a North Dakotan, Rex asks, how does the posting work in North Dakota? Specifically, e-posting versus normal posting. Can you hunt private ground if it has no postings?
Yes. So I want to, the answer to your question is yes. If it's not electronically posted and it's not paper posted, you can access it. Now I'm a huge fan of our North Dakota Game and Fish Department and everything that they do. I think that the electronic posting was a bit of a miss. I would have liked to have seen them either go all in or all out. on the electronic posting. We had a system here in North Dakota for years, and I thought that it worked quite well, where it needed to be posted on a corner of the field. Like you're looking at a section of land, right? In North Dakota, a lot of times it's divided into quarters. And if you look at your onX and you can see it's got different names on all four corners, it needs to be posted on each of those quarters if it's going to be posted. If it's all owned by one person, they can literally post the approach to the field or one corner, and that entire section is posted now. Um, so there's and then there's even more gray area, like you in stuff that just drives me nuts. You'll see an old wooden sign staked in the grass, and it'll have like the P of a posted sign that's 15 years old. I just always err on the side of caution. If it looks like it was posted at some point, I'm either not going to go in there, or I'm going to try to get a hold of the landowner to see if I can go in there. A lot of stuff here gets paper posted like now, the week before deer season starts. So stuff that hasn't been e-posted and hasn't been paper posted 2 weeks ago, when a lot of people were up here for pheasant hunting, if somebody comes back, they might go there and there's a fresh posted sign. It's likely because deer season's going on. So the answer to his question is yes. If it's not paper posted and it's not electronically posted, you can access it. Now, I just always err on the side of caution, because there's been enough bad incidents that have gotten giant chunks of land locked up, where somebody didn't drive all the way around and check the corners to make sure it was posted or not posted, and they see some pheasants in the ditch and they're out and guns are blazing, and now that guy may have had that section posted for friends and family or for his kids or for himself. And say he had another 8, 10, 15,000 acres. Now he's like, all hunters are a-holes, and I don't want I'm just going to shut everything down. So I just always caution everybody to make sure that you're trying to do things the right way. And if you do have an interaction with a landowner that says, hey, it's not posted, but I really don't want you in here, just leave. Like it's not that big of a deal. Just go someplace else, find a different spot to hunt. I don't want to make anybody nervous or anything like that, but it is getting to be more and more common now, where some people can have some negative interactions with a landowner, and you really, really, really need to remember that you are acting as a ambassador to the hunting community. And it doesn't matter if you were trying to do things the right way. If you have a negative interaction with a landowner, just be very apologetic and, just kind of sorry, I didn't mean anything by it, and try to make us all as hunters, like I want to hunt that spot next week, and I don't want to go and knock on a door and be like, no, I don't let anybody hunt anymore. So it's one of those things that I just try to tell people to be real cautious about.
Yeah, I mean, I've had the opportunity through onX to be on like a few different, not like on panels, but to sit in on panels where landowners talk about, especially in Montana, it's a big thing with elk, and
Hmm.
elk on private lands, and a lot of discussions and there's a lot of people working on it. I think we'll kind of hopefully partially remedy the situation eventually.
I
But
hope so.
it was three ranchers, and a lot of them said, man, I used to allow hunting, but there
Mhm.
was too many problems, and for some of them it was, I told them to leave the gate open and it closed, and they closed it and my cows couldn't get to water, or
Sure.
they left shell casings all over the place or garbage, or hunters, sometimes we can be our own worst enemy. We
Absolutely.
gotta,
And one of the other things that we see here a lot is there'll be a spot that it was open to hunting, and people will go out there and they'll hunt and they'll clean the birds and they'll throw the carcasses right there on the approach. Don't do that. Don't
yeah,
do that. Like it looks really, really bad. Whether you pulled all the meat off of them or not, I understand the argument. You can let the fox and coyotes eat them, whatever. I get it. Take the stuff with you because it looks awful. I don't like to see it. I'm a hunter and I don't like to drive past it. And like you'll see it pretty often, and it's really a bad look.
yeah. I mean, early season, I will have bags of carcasses in my freezer
Hmm.
because I will bring, I shoot snowshoe hares a lot too. and I bring them home and cut the meat off, and I don't want them sitting in my garbage can in 90-degree heat for 6 days. So, garbage pickups Monday. If I shoot birds or something on a Wednesday, I throw everything in a Ziploc bag and freeze it and bring it out to the garbage.
Nah, just throw it in the dumpster behind the onX office there in Missoula. Nobody will
That would be
notice.
bad. I walk in by the dumpster every day, but and honestly, part of it, that's just telling other hunters, hey, there's good bird hunting here. You might be able to
Right.
keep your spots a little more secret, pick up your shell
Sure.
casings, don't
Sure.
leave bird carcasses. And
Right. But and one of the things that you'll see is the landowners will just see the carcasses, but they're not going to go out there and examine them. And
right.
so it looks like somebody just shot a bunch of birds and just left them.
Yep.
And like that's what it looks like. And it's just like we really, really, really need to do a better job of always erring on the side of caution. If you see stuff, if you see trash in the road, just stop and pick it up. If leave everything the exact way you found it, just like you were saying. If a gate was closed, make sure it's closed. If a gate was open, leave it open. There's a reason why it's open. Or, just call the landowner and ask them, hey, do you want me to close this gate? And first of all, it's just being kind of a decent human, a little bit, where it's like, hey, I don't know if somebody else left this gate down, but the gate's open. Do you want me to close it for you? And sometimes I'll be like, oh no, the cattle need to get through there, whatever. But if you talk to the landowner and start making those relationships, and they see you picking up your empty shotgun shell hulls, which I seen you do today. Even though you were shooting a semi-auto, you stopped every time after you shot and you picked up your hulls. Like stuff, like it's just that little stuff that's just kind of that common sense stuff that us as hunters are not very good at. And we just, if you see that kind of stuff, just pick it up or tell your buddy, hey, you just shot 3 shells at that rooster. Pick up your damn shells. It's not that hard.
Speaking of shooting and shells, couple questions here. One, John mentioned earlier, we were talking about wait 3 seconds. He's wondering what we mean by that. So what Tyler was getting at there was he mentioned I'm shooting a semi-auto. It's an older Browning, so it's a fixed full choke. And the pheasant I shot today, he was a little close. So it got the full brunt. It got the full brunt of that 3-inch, number 5 Boss Bismuth. I grew up rough grouse hunting. We mentioned that. And rough grouse
Yes.
in northern Minnesota, you hear wing beats, you better be pulling the trigger pretty quick because it's going to be
Yeah.
good. So I've got to break that habit.
Yeah.
Sometimes I remember, sometimes I don't. So yeah, what they mean, especially with pheasants, you've generally got some time. You can
Really any of the
get out
prairie
there.
birds. Any of the prairie birds. And even with bobwhites a lot of times, or sharptails or sage grouse certainly, or even blues up in the mountains. If they're not in the dang trees, you got plenty of time. Um, I just it's always the people that are primarily rough grouse hunters. They get out here to the prairie and they're so used to that bird disappearing in 3 wing beats that they shoot way too fast. And either they miss the first 2 shots before the bird or before your pattern actually has time to get to its normal size, and they stand there with an empty gun as the bird actually presents them with the shot that they should have been taking, or they hit it and it's just a total pillow. I mean, just explodes. And it's like, what's the point? What
Yeah.
are we doing here? We're trying to shoot these things because we really like to eat them. We want our dogs to retrieve them. I've seen people that have shot sharptails when they're coming out of a bush at 15 feet, and the dog won't even pick it up because it's just mangled. It's
Just
not good.
beak and feet.
So as soon as you hear them wing beats, give it the old 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, boom, and it's going to let that bird kind of expand that distance out a little bit. And we're talking about those birds that are getting up inside of 10 yards. Like primarily when I'm shooting my birds, I like to shoot them between 20 and 30 yards. And if that bird gets up inside of 10 yards, you have a good couple of seconds before that bird's going to get to that range. And it's also going to help just kind of settle you down a little bit. You're going to get your feet right. You're going to shoulder the gun right. Everything's going to be a little bit more planned out instead of just wailing away and watching the bird fly.
That's applicable to so much hunting. I archery hunt elk and stuff, and I've just had to remind myself, you've got more time than you think.
Yeah.
slow down, make sure your
Yep.
form's right, make sure you got your gun mounted, or, archery was
Slow
always
is smooth
sure.
and smooth is fast.
Yep.
You know, it really is that simple. And, uh, you know, we've gotten, I mean, the questions have been phenomenal, but there's a couple things that I really want to discuss before we do end for tonight. For the new hunters, there's something that the reason that we kind of started, that you wanted to do this kind of question and answer thing, is
Hmm.
because there's a lot of things that newer hunters likely don't they don't look at things quite the same way. That I've been hunting for 33 years. I've been chasing birds. I started hunting birds when I was 8, and I'm going to be 41 here next month. Um, the when I was out in Montana in September with Ben from onX and Nate Akey from Pheasants Forever and our friend Brent Kroll, and we were talking about, kind of the chess match that goes on. And like, we're talking about this as four guys that have spent an inordinate amount of time chasing birds all over the country, all different types of birds, all different species. We all have pointing dogs. And one of the things that we talked about was kind of that chess game that starts after the dog goes on point. And it's such a giant part of bird hunting. Like, one of the most common questions that I get is, how are you always in the right spot to make a shot? And it's it's that chess game that starts after the dog is established point. Like, we ran through it today when we were chasing sharptails this afternoon. Like, November sharptails are tough. Uh, they 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 do not tolerate pressure from dogs. They don't tolerate people talking. They don't tolerate, anything. If they see you, they're gone, kind of thing. And the dog establishes point. The first thing that I'm looking at is where I think those birds are likely to be, where I'm guessing those birds are, which way they're going to escape based on the wind direction, how far away I think they are based on scenting conditions. All that kind of stuff starts going into them. And then the internal clock that goes off in my brain as I get closer to where I'm thinking that bird is. And, all that kind of stuff is that's all things that you're going to learn from doing. But if you start kind of looking for it, you're going to get better at it faster. And it's going to make you, and I don't want to sound like, the only reason we're going out there is to fill game bags full of birds, even though that is definitely part of it. That's one of the great things about upland hunting, is being able to go out and get some, 3 pheasants or whatever and make a meal because pheasant meat's delicious, or going and getting some blue grouse or whatever it might be. But some of these things that new hunters haven't kind of picked up yet, this is one of the big ones, is kind of starting to anticipate where you think that bird's coming from, knowing your dog well enough to know when it starts kind of, nose is up in the air and it's kind of starting to slow down a little bit and it's getting a little stocky and all that kind of stuff. And you can kind of start judging where you think that bird is in front of them in relation to the dog. So I wanted to, kind of touch on some of that a little bit before we wrapped up as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's something I'm still learning a lot. And some of it's, still relatively new with the dog, but I remember Ben talking on that podcast, Rough Grouse. He says, sometimes you can look right and see there's not a bird right off the nose of that dog, but he said, oh, there's a little bit of cover 5 yards
Right.
up. That's probably where they are.
Right.
And you're not going to get it right 100% of the time, but to start
No.
thinking, rough grouse, they can run a little bit sometimes. Pheasants love
Right.
to run.
Right.
They might be in that next patch of cover, or, you talked about, well, the wind's really ripping. They might be
Mhm.
way the heck out there versus a still day. They're probably a little bit
Or
closer.
right. And sending conditions are one of those black hole topics with those of us that eh, have hunted with bird dogs for quite a while. It can change hour to hour, not just day to day. Like this morning, we had exceptionally good sending conditions. We had my dog and your dog had a covey of Huns. Literally, I mean, I've hunted that covey a bunch of times, like not this year, but I've been hunting that covey of birds for many years. I knew that they were up there in those bushes, but those dogs started making that covey. They started, like I said, their nose was up in the air. They were kind of getting stocky. They were tracking towards it for 100 yards probably. And
Mhm.
then this afternoon we went out and we chased sharptails with my little dog CJ, and CJ's got a just a monster nose, and she pointed all those birds within 30 feet, 40 feet maybe. The sending conditions had changed that much from this morning when there was a lot of moisture in the air to this afternoon. The wind was even less this afternoon than it was this morning, but it was drier, and the dog should have been able to, if we would have been hunting those this morning, that dog would have been picking those up at 60, 70 yards instead of 30 yards.
Yep.
So if you think about stuff like that when you're out there walking and you start putting together some of these pieces, it's just going to make you a little bit more successful.
Awesome. I've got two questions and then we'll wrap it up here. Do want to remind folks, I'll post the giveaway link in the chat again if you haven't entered. So Steven asked, you were talking about dogs, says, just wondering your opinion on different breeds of dogs. Said you talked about a few earlier. Said, based on your preference, what do you like to run? Steven said he personally has English setters. So
Hey,
that should
it's
be
Steven.
familiar to you. Just
Well,
wanted to hear from us.
well
So
done. Yeah. I think I classified dogs in just two categories: good ones and not good ones. And I'm fairly breed blind, I guess. I've hunted with really good dogs of all different breeds. I've hunted with really good labs, springers. I've even hunted with a couple good spinonis, which are pretty rare. But like, there's good dogs in every breed out there. I personally like setters, and then I have one short hair that's a very, very good bird dog as well. But the reason that I like those two breeds of dogs, I like dogs that are aesthetically pleasing to me when they go on point. Like I like a dog that's pretty, I guess would be a good way to put it. An English setter stacked up with a big tall tail, like my little dog Jesse or CJ. It's as pretty as it gets. And then I also hunt really big country, so I need dogs that can cover some ground. So I don't have a preference on dogs. I like dogs that I can hunt in the country that I hunt in. Dogs that are going to be a little bit more heat tolerant. They're going to be, kind of flashy, as we call it, all that kind of stuff. But, you know, perfect dog for you is the perfect dog for you. The person that hunts rough grouse 5 times a year and maybe comes west for a week doesn't need the same kind of dog power that I need. You can get something that's a little slower, a little bit more methodical, a little bit easier to control in the woods. 'Cause like my little dog CJ, like we were talking about earlier, she is a nightmare to hunt rough grouse with because she's all motor and not much brakes. And it's not a real effective to hunt with a 300-yard dog in the grouse woods, but it's also not very effective to hunt sharptails with a 40-yard dog out on the prairie either. So you just kind of need to pick and choose, and again, be realistic with yourself as to what you're going to spend the most time doing, and then do some research and get a breed that's gonna accomplish what you're looking for.
yeah. And I'm a relatively new dog owner. I have one dog. She's kind of got to do it all from hunting mountain grouse to pheasants and sharpies to retrieving ducks. I've got a wire hair. That was kind of by accident. A buddy of mine's dad was having a litter of pups, and I said, "Yep, I'll take one." And he had wire hairs. If he was
Well,
having springers, I might have had a springer. If he was having
she's
short
a
hairs, I'd have had a short hair.
yeah, she's a really nice looking dog and just a sweetheart as well.
Mhm.
And when she goes on point, she looks really nice. So,
Yeah.
and it's really just whatever makes you happy. But for me, it's setters and short hairs.
Yep. All right. Um, I know I said there was two more questions. There's one I can answer here. Warner asked if we would consider doing another upland hunting or bird dog AMA. I think absolutely. I love doing these types of classes. I want to expand them to other species as well. And then last question from my former college roommate and current good
Oh
friend
boy.
Michael, who is a setter owner. He's got a
Excellent.
griff and he's got an English setter. He's a rough grouse woodcock guy. How
Mhm.
terrible was Jack's shooting today?
The
Thank
only
you,
reason
Michael.
he
No,
even Michael, the only reason he even acknowledged this question is because he did shoot pretty well today. If he would have shot bad, he wouldn't have asked the question. He shot pretty good today. Uh, he uh, he shot 1.5 sharp tails. I will claim a half of one. I think
we tag
think
teamed.
we double teamed that second one a little bit. And he shot two roosters. And he killed the birds that he was supposed to kill today. So I was pretty happy with him.
Yep. Yeah, and I mean, I contributed to the Pittman Robertson Fund by just spraying some other ones out
Yeah,
there that connect. That's good for conservation.
that's right. That's right.
All right. Well, we went an hour and a half. I know there's a lot of questions we didn't get to answer. Apologies to everybody. There were some fantastic questions in there. We could probably be here all night with the amount of questions we had. So
Definitely.
we'll maybe try to do another one of these, maybe, preseason next year or something
Sure.
like that. But just want to reiterate, thanks again to everybody for joining us. Check out Tyler's podcast if you like more chats like this. And check out the future onX Hunt Masterclasses, and we'll catch you on the next one. Hope everybody has a good rest of their season.
Thanks, guys.